Shalom. Call halal Yahweh by Shem Abishai by Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth among the heathen that look like the heathen, and to the Akwaf that are listening and learning, to you I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you another lesson in truth. And just going to do an expose on this book, The Black Codes in Georgia, and also we'll be using The Indian Slave Trade by Alain Gallet, just to prove some factual points that are ignored, and a few ignorances that are printed in this book, being that the authors either because they didn't know, because they were ignorant of the fact, or they were just being willfully pro-ignorance. And what I mean by that is simple with this whole blackness. And as I start reading a little bit of the book, you'll begin to understand what I'm saying, that this whole the color scheme of skin color is something that was completely made up by the so-called white man to support the invention of whiteness, to support white superiority. In 1681 in Virginia was the first time ever in law that it was written in documentation of a portion of humanity that was referred to as white. Okay, and whether you were so-called black, red, or yellow, these false terms that they created, all right, that the so-called white man created, who actually is red. He's the real red man, all right. It's not just their necks is red, their whole bodies. That pinkish pale color is described in the Bible, the nation of Edom, their true identity. So all this was created to support this new, form of humanity that they called white, and they were calling natives who are actually brown. They really are brown. They were calling them red. And as you can see here in the Indian slave trade, even in this artist depiction, these are brown men, fighting. And Esau, through his policy, he would promise this tribe's land, and and that whole sort of thing. And then he would join with this tribe to fight against their own brothers. And then once they took their lands, they would do the same thing over and over again until they were diminished and they were increased. All right. But all this was done for control. So we're going to start with, as a matter of fact, let me get a scripture, a milk scripture, one that I use often. This is Luke 8:17. Because that's something that happens daily here in America as we wind down in these last days of these prophecies coming to pass, is that all these lies that have been, orchestrated and written into history are being proven to be just that, lies. The history of the so-called white man is engulfed in lies and made up stories and fables. All right, this is Luke 8:17, and it reads, "For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be made known and come abroad." So so a lot of the things that they try to cover up and hide, and there's so many things that, after the fall, after the Yahushai gets dominion, it's probably going to be even more things that's going to come out, which is going to make the slavery and punishment of the so-called white man and the heathen that much worse when these things come abroad. All right, so let's jump into this book. I'm just going to read in 1866 was the term persons of color when that was created. All right, and it says an act to define the term persons of color, and to declare the rights of such persons, that all Negroes, mulattoes, mestizos, and their descendants having 1/8 Negro or African blood in their veins shall be known in this state as persons of color. And a person of color absolutely had zero rights. Okay? So they created it. All right, so I'm not even going to read that. And this book was compiled by Dan Moore Sr. and Michelle Mitchell. And just for the record, the name Michelle, it should never, the name Michelle could either be a male or a female name. A woman should never be named Michelle. For the name Michelle and the name Mitchell are just different spellings of the word Michael. So anyone's name that's Mitchell, your name is really Michael. All right, and if your name is Michelle, that's just a French way of saying Michael. You know, it should never have been connected to a woman. That's a very masculine name for a woman. But but in this society, we've gotten used to seeing women with the name Michelle. But in some societies, you will come across that name, and it's actually a man's name. All right, so that confusion, but that's the West for you. So just know, if your name is Mitchell, it just means Michael. So in essence, this person Michelle Mitchell, really name is Michael. All right, just thought that was an interesting bit of information for anyone who didn't know. So yeah, so if your name is Mitchell, your name really is Michael. All right, it's just another way of spelling and pronouncing the name Michael. I did research on the name. All right. But I'm going to go straight to, well, let me see. I guess this is still in the introduction on page 4. I'm just going to read, and it says, "Indeed, they were not persons at all, but chattel property of their enslavers. However, when it came to the adoption of the United States Constitution, following the American War of Independence in 1787, a compromise was reached between the northern and southern states that allowed bond persons to be considered 3/5 of a man for the purposes of representation and taxation. Nevertheless, in practice, blacks did not have 3/5 of citizenship rights. And as the U.S. Supreme Court confirmed in Dred Scott decision in 1857, they were not citizens under the U.S. Constitution and had no rights which any white man was bound to respect." You hear that? And they still look at you because that was never reversed. You're talking about an unrighteous decree. All right? The scriptures tell you to never trust thine enemy. In fact, let's see if we can find that real quick. Because they're saying that you're 3/5 of a purpose to use you. But then when you try to exercise your rights, you don't have 3/5 of a right. You don't have any. That's just wow. Find that real quick. I think that's in Sirach, the 9th chapter. Or 10. Salakia. So I hunt for it. Oh no. Well, you know what? That wasn't what I was looking for, but we can read this because it fits it too. This is Ecclesiastes 10 and 8, and it reads, "Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another." All right, and I will find that scripture. It'll come back to me because I'm sure with that it'll circle back around. But yeah, because with these decrees these were extremely unrighteous, and they were able to gain wealth and property as a result of it. All right, these laws that segregated and discriminated against free blacks of color were generally called black codes. All right, so you had so-called free blacks. While de facto, that is, in practice, that were patterns of segregation and discrimination, particularly in employment and social relations, it was not until the 1880s These practices were codified into law. A particular new feature of laws were segregation of blacks on railroads, streetcars, and their denial of right to vote and hold office. They also were forbidden to own firearms after they were made free. These new laws were subsequently encompassed under the term Jim Crow, based on a popular minstrel character of the times. In many places, came to be known as black codes. Thus, from the post-emancipation period at the close of the 19th century until the middle of the last century, so the 1960s, past the middle, African American, which is a made-up term, all right? You're neither African nor American. Africans are Hamites, and Americans are actually the Northern Kingdom, all right? They were the first and real Americans, so to speak, that actually lived here, all right? Which is, the Northern Kingdom of Israel, okay? And it says, and those two places are, by the way, are named after two different so-called white men. Africa is named after Scipio Africanus, and America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. All right, so you calling yourself after the names of two so-called white people, and trying to associate that with the race. So it's all made up. It's all fabrications. It's all just lies. All right. Thus, from the post-emancipation period at the close of the 19th century until the middle of the last century, African Americans experienced a new slavery in the form of legal and extra-legal caste system under the black codes. And you're still under those to a certain extent to this day. All right? Let me see if I could find what I was looking for earlier. It's bothering me now. It was Ecclesiastes Sirach 12, not 10. And it reads, point is in verse 10, but I'm going to start at 9. And it says, in the posterity of a man, enemies will be grieved, but in his adversary, even a friend will depart. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. All right, so you can't trust these people, man. They write these laws and say, oh, well, you have this sort of law, and then when it comes time to apply that law, they deny it to you. All right, though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him, that thou shalt be unto him as if thou hast wiped a looking glass. Thou shalt know that his rust have not been altogether wiped away. So, it's like wiping away the dirt off of a glass to look through, and then when you look through it, you still see that they're dirty. Right? You can never you can't wipe away something clean, like the scripture says. You can't make something clean that has already been deemed unclean by the Lord. So let's get to you know what? This is an overview by Michael Michelle Mitchell, and it says, and this is on page 9. Then I'm gonna go straight to some of the codes and read through them and read some scripture. But it says, contrary to popular belief, black codes did not begin in 1865 in order to govern and restrict the lives of newly freed slaves in the state of Georgia. You will find that black codes were written in the early 1700s. So they had, this is Esau prepares things well ahead of time. All right. And the gradualism. So they already knew that they were going to do this eventually. Whether they were referred to as slave codes, pre-1865 black codes, or Jim Crow laws, 1876 to 1967. Wow. Damn, there 100 years of that Jim Crow shit. All right. Black codes were and are a comprehensive and systematic arranged body of laws created to devalue, dehumanize, degrade, disenfranchise, restrict, deny, separate, punish, and oppress peoples of African descent. And I remember, This is where Michelle Mitchell's ignorance shows forth. The people that came here on cargo slave ships were not Africans. They were Hebrew Israelites. They were the Israelites of the Southern Kingdom. All right. Africans are Hamites, Hamitic people. They are a different dark race of people. They're not the same. They don't look the same. They don't have the same spirit. They don't act the same. You know, Negroes don't let buffaloes piss on their heads to change their hair color. You know, and they don't say meat is meat and eat anything. You know, monkeys, lizards, you know, whatever. There's a complete different spirit in here. I'm just going to show you real quick in the evidence folder. Image that I keep on deck just for these quick moments. All right. Two different races of people. This is from the Zondervan Dictionary Bible. Ham, the youngest son of Noah, the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. And then they have an image of a so-called Jew, a Judite, and an African, a Hamite. All right? Two different races of people. They even have different skull structures for that matter. And remember the shovel teeth that the so-called natives and the so-called Negroes have. Africans don't have those teeth. That's why in 1683 in Virginia, both the so-called natives and the so-called Negro were both called niggers. As a matter of fact, the term nigger started with the natives before they even started using that terminology for so-called Negroes. All right? That's a fact. In fact, let me prove it to you. Where is that? I know I got it. I need to add that into the evidence folder. Here we go. All right. As you can see there, they were called the Birmingham niggers. Cleveland Indians were the Birmingham niggers. See a nigger, all right? You see that? A dark-skinned person of any origin in the early U.S. with reference to American Indians. Why? Because they look the same. Remember, there's a lot of Negroes running around, so-called black people that were reclassified as black that are actually natives. Okay. All right. The look that they have now is because of the intermixing and mixing, and the bloodline still survives, through the male. So, and then if you biblically understanding the Bible, you would understand that your nationality is through your father, as we're gonna find that out. And Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, changed that. And the color of your skin has nothing to do with who you are. You are of your father's seed. All right. So I'm gonna read Isaiah 10:1. Real quick before I read this next couple pages. I'm gonna fly through them. These are some of the actual codes that are written down. I'm not gonna read them all, but this is Isaiah 10:1. These are some unrighteous decrees, boy, I tell you. Isaiah 10:1, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievances which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. And that's exactly what they're doing. All right. So this is on page 1. Definition from the Revised Codes of Georgia Laws, 1863. Who are citizens? All right. That's the name of this one. All free white persons born in the United States or any other state of this union who are or may become residents of this state with the intention of remaining therein, all free white persons naturalized under the laws of the Confederate States. All right. And remember, whiteness is something that they made up in Virginia in 1681. There was no such thing as white people until they wrote it onto paper and made it law. Who is white? Persons having 1/8 or more of Negro or African blood in their veins are not white persons in the meaning of this code. All right. Which is a bunch of bullshit, because the next one is going to explain it. It says the status of a mother fixes that of the children. The status of every person in the state upon the question of freedom is determined by the status of his mother. What that really did was gave, without saying, was gave the so-called white man free access to rape and have sex with as many women of color as he wanted, and not be responsible for the children. And the sad thing is that those children are so-called white, regardless of what they came out looking like, because you are of the seed of your father. So something that the BOIs, black only Israelites, do not like to talk about. They never come with that argument, because they're literally probably more than half the so-called black population are tares, the children of so-called black men. I mean, Salakia, the children of so-called white men. That's what they are, probably more than half the population, because white men were having more sex with our women than we were. All right, because he was having sex with his own wife, and plus every other so-called black woman around him of his choosing, because he could. And often it came in the form of rape. And there was nothing you could do about it because you had no rights. Free Negroes. Negroes, once slaves, who have, with their owners' consent, left this state to reside in the state or country where slavery is not tolerated, to become free, and free Negroes who have changed their residence to any state within the provisions of this chapter cannot return hither. All right? So if once you were free, you couldn't go back to the state where you were from. You'd be made a slave again. Or that would cause problems. They didn't want the other Negroes seeing you free, and they knew you. All right? That could probably cause, insurrection type tendencies. Article 1. Who are persons of color? All Negroes, mulattoes, mestizanos, and their descendants having 1/8 Negro or African blood in their veins shall be known in this state as a person of color. So they purposely put that false title of African upon you. All right, is a complete and total something that they made up. All right, you became a persona non grata. Okay, this is what they did. Child legitimate. Every colored child born before the 9th day of March, 1866, is hereby declared to be legitimate child of his mother, but such a child is legitimate child of his colored father only when born within what was regarded as a state of wedlock, or when the parents were living together as husband and wife. All right, so if a white male has sex with a so-called Asian, Chinese, black or native woman, as they referred to, that child was legitimate. All right. But if a so-called black man had a child with the woman and wasn't married to her, all right, the child was illegitimate. All right. These are some nasty, unrighteous decrees. Okay. So we're going to stop here, and then and we'll go right into part 2 when we get into the other book, this book, The Indian Slave Trade, just to prove some points. All right, this is a really good book. I own both these books. It's just easier to put them on the screen so you can see where the information is coming from, the pages, so you can, do a reference check to anything, or you can check to make sure that, I'm not just making any of this up. I'm reading right from the books that you're seeing on the pages that I'm telling you. All right. So with that, I'm going to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rakakwadash, and Yahweh willing, see you on the next one. Shalom.